Welcome to Common Sense Christianity. This is Steve again with another video. And I'm going to continue our series on narcissism. And this is an important video, one that I take no pleasure in presenting, but at the same time, I think it is needed. And what we're going to talk about today is narcissism and the death of the black family. Narcissism and the death of the black family. We've been pretty inundated recently with news of things like Charlottesville, South Carolina, where they had the protest and the violence and everything surrounding that. We've also seen the pulling down of statues across the country and the fighting against what they meant, in various communities. And we also see a lot of talk of racism in our country. It seems like racism has reared its ugly head. And then we see all of the various movements, the alt-right, the alt-left, Antifa, white supremacists, so forth and so on. And it all seems to revolve around a certain amount of bigotry and violence, and kind of at the center of a lot of these things is black folks, black people. And it always seems like whatever negative thing is going on in the culture, it seems to affect black people more. Have you noticed that? So those that are listening, and really this video is for everybody. I don't want you to think that because of the title of this video that has to do with the death of the black family, that if you're not black, you can't listen. What happens in the culture, what is happening in the African American community, in the black culture, is also happening in the larger culture of people, both in the United States and in other Western countries and Western cultures. It's also happening. The same things are happening in the larger culture. But like I said, it always seems like the negative things that are happening in culture always affect the black people more, to a greater degree, which is why I'm bringing you this video today. So what I'm going to do is look at a couple of historical events, a couple of things that has brought us to where we are today, specifically in the African American community, but to a larger extent in all of culture and all of the country, and in other Western countries as well. And then we'll look at where we're at now, and then kind of try to find out how we can remedy some of these ills, some of these situations that have got us to where we are now. So the first thing I want to talk about is the sexual revolution. And to those of you that are old enough, the sexual revolution really began in the late 50s, kind of continued on into the 60s, and up until the early 70s. And there were a lot of things, a lot of cultural changes that were going on at the time. And you saw the changes in the music, you saw the changes in young people, in their perception of things, and you saw changes in media and movies and the music and all these other avenues. But let's look at what many believe caused this sexual revolution in the United States and also in other parts of the West. First, we have the teaching of Sigmund Freud, and then we also had the advent of the birth control pill. These things helped usher in a new era. So let's look at Freud, Sigmund Freud. He taught that sexual repression was the chief psychological problem of mankind, and that was a view which profoundly affected modern society as a whole. So really what he was saying is that all of our ills, all of our psychological problems were caused by the repression of our sexual self, and that if we unleashed that would solve a lot of the problems. So that was his thinking, and that had a tremendous influence on the thinking of the young people in the 50s and the 60s. Another thing that changed the perception of sex was the birth control pill. Now, like it or not, it ushered in the mindset that you could have sex without worrying about the consequences of someone getting pregnant. And, that to avoid that shame, because at that time it was still a shame to get pregnant. It was still looked down upon. In the 50s, the American culture still believed that the nuclear family was the way to go. Mother, father, kids, so forth and so on, and that morally was the right way to go, and premarital sex was still looked down upon. Yes, it was happening, of course it was happening, but in the culture, it wasn't accepted, not like today. Now, another thing that happened, another person that had influence on the sexual revolution was Alfred Kinsey of the Kinsey Report notoriety. Alfred Kinsey taught that sex was a normal condition and that the lack of it made you crazy, deformed, psychotic, and so forth and so on. So we see that Freud influenced a lot of Kinsey's work. What a lot of people don't know is that Kinsey worked for worked with a Nazi pedophile, and himself sexually abused many children under the guise of experiments. He was able to procure parents who gave their children to this man, and he did all kinds of experiments and kind of fulfilled his deviant sexual desires on them. But at the same time, this man is looked up to and idolized in several circles for his sexual studies, some of which are in the aforementioned Kinsey report. You can look that up, get some more information. There's a lot of information out there on the web, so I encourage you to look that up. Dave Bohai of Family Life magazine says that the media would have us believe that the sexual revolution has allowed people to remove the shackles of repressive, puritanical morality and experience freedom. People are sexual beings, and they need to explore their sexuality when they feel ready, without the fear of guilt or shame. So what we've done in our society is that we've kind of followed this mantra so much that even our extremely young people are getting involved with sex earlier and earlier in their lives. 12, 13, 14-year-old kids have no problem talking about their sexual escapades in public. And I have no reason to doubt them, because, they're in this culture of charged sexual content in the movies and music, and even on TV and the magazines. Every form of media you have, it's on your phone. Kids have access to all of this on their phone. And so we're a sex-charged culture, partly because of the sexual revolution that happened last century in the mid 1900s. So what has this brought us? It's removed the sense of sacredness of sex, and consequently of the family. And no more is this more felt than in the African American family and the black family, where we see premarital sex, where we see young people having babies, where we see, to a great extent, single mothers, and the hookup culture, and people just getting together for sex because they're attracted to another person without any thought of the possible consequences. You see, my friend, ideas have consequences. Some consequences are good based on good ideas, and other consequences are bad based on bad ideas. So we see the outgrowth of this sexual revolution in our community, especially in the black community, where having sex is just viewed as something that you do, something that's natural, something that's kind of takes you to the next stage of adulthood or your personhood, or where you feel like if you haven't had sex, then you don't feel like a complete person. These are the devastating effects of this sexual revolution. What the sexual revolution did was give people a sense of freedom, a freedom to do whatever they want, and to forget about God, and forget about things that the Bible said, or forget about things that they learned in church. And we're going to talk about church in a little while, and that how in the African American community we have forsaken God in our lives, in our everyday lives. And this is part of the slippery slope of problems that has led us to where we are, and even the larger community. So there is a culture of sex permeating our society. Like I said, it's everywhere. TV, movies, music, everywhere you can possibly think of. Sex has invaded that particular medium. And when you separate sex and love, you come up with something that, in my opinion, is evil and self-centered. Thus, the narcissistic label applies to this. The sexual revolution was nothing but a narcissistic pull towards doing what you want, and thinking that there are no consequences. What it is moving outside of God's established provision for sex and family, and then you wind up losing the built-in protections that were provided by it. So that's the sexual revolution. So my friends, this is basically just the tip of the iceberg. I want you to just get you a little acclimated to the sexual revolution and why it is deleterious to the black family. We certainly will be talking about the other aspects of why I feel that the black family is headed toward a spiral of death. And I'm sorry to sound so dramatic, but that's really what it is. But you know what? Out of all of this, and just like any other situation that we find ourselves in, both personally and as a group, God is still able to save us from ourselves. God is able to reverse whatever trend that we have gotten ourselves into, whether it's the sexual revolution or what we're going to be talking about in future episodes, things like abortion and like the negative aspects of the black church and a whole bunch of other things we'll be discussing in our videos. God is still able to bring us out from that and put us back on the right track. And that's really what we want. We want to be back on the right track. And God can do that for us. We can't do it ourselves. And that's the thing that I always want to share in my videos, is that we get ourselves into a mess. We try to inch our ways out of it by various methods, but only God can do that. And the way God does that is that he changes us from the inside out. He doesn't change society by groups of people. He changes individuals, and those individuals in turn affect the community at large. So that's really what we're going for. We're going for people to make changes in their heart, and only God can do that. And no matter what you've done, God will forgive you through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. There is no sin, no wrongdoing that you have committed that God can't cleanse you from and give you a new start in life. So we just want to let you know that the gospel of Jesus Christ extends to anyone and everyone. So thank you for listening. As always, I appreciate your input. Leave a comment in the comments section of this broadcast, and we'll be glad to get back with you. We also want to encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. We have a growing number of subscribers, so we want to thank those who have subscribed in the past week. We appreciate it. Spread the word. This is your page. We want to make sure that you participate and that you get a chance to give us some feedback, and we certainly will reply to you. So we're going to continue our series in a couple of days. Be looking out for the next video. And as I always say, God bless you, and I'll see you next time.